Hey, beautiful people. So we talked about this before in a live, right? Drowning theory. And I couldn't pull that segment out. For some reason, YouTube, whatever. Okay. Basically, I'm just going to go back down that road, share some things regarding dry drowning. Now, if that's what happened to Summer, then we would have to understand that there's no way there was ever any flowers planted or anything like that. Um, we'd have to accept a few things. But right now, let's just look at this whole dry drowning theory and the concept because it does happen and it does exist. As rare as it may be, it does happen. So let's check it out.
The News 8 investigators uncovering hidden dangers in the water tonight. We're talking about secondary drowning. Did you know your child can actually drown hours after being in the water? It takes the lives of children every single year. News 8 has your back tonight with some potentially life-saving tips. Take a look at this video. You see that baby? Watch. It flips itself over on its back. News 8's Allie Reed has this very special report tonight that every parent needs to see.
Drowning is the leading cause of death in children under the age of 5.
That's submersion drowning. But there's another type of drowning that, while it accounts for only 1 to 2% of drownings, poses a very real danger. It's called secondary drowning.
Kids are in the water, potentially have no symptoms, and then later on start with coughing, respiratory distress, difficulty breathing.
What's scary as a parent is that your child may seem fine after falling into a pool or lake, but hours later, the water they inhaled can build up in their lungs, causing them to almost drown in their own fluid. It can happen to a child of any age and can cause serious injury and even death.
The injury is really having something happen to the lungs, and then later on, as oxygen is not getting delivered to the organs, you're going to have a change in activity.
One of the first things I teach my babies, my students of any age, is breath control. It's the #1 most important thing.
Dina Bloom-Rothman is a certified infant survival instructor. She teaches babies as young as 7 months how to control their breathing so they don't take in water.
Our program is unique because it's not just about swimming, it's about survival.
It can be tough to watch. But as you can see, it's effective. After a 10-minute swim class 4 times a week for 4 weeks, the babies in her swim class know how to save themselves.
It only took her probably less than a week to realize she has to flip up and go to the air. And now it's amazing. I love it because I know if something were to happen, she'd be okay. She could figure it out.
My lessons are very, very short. So if for whatever reason, again, pretty much never happens, but if a child takes a couple of sips, it's only 10 minutes. We're not going to have any risks of water intoxication.
If your child does fall in and comes up coughing up water, doctors say to monitor them over the next 8 hours. Look out for a change in your child's activity. If they're having difficulty breathing, if their lips turn blue, or if they're acting different, perhaps more lethargic. If your child experiences any of these symptoms, you should call your doctor.
As with any rare thing, as a parent using your maternal or paternal instinct to say, you know what, things are kind of weird. The baby fell in the hot tub, now we're an hour or 2 later, something's not right, and the first symptoms would typically be respiratory distress or difficulty breathing.
Secondary drowning can happen to anyone, but kids are most at risk because their lungs are so small. It's important to note that no amount of training can ever replace proper supervision. The #1 way to protect against drowning is to never take your eyes off your child around any body of water. For News 8, I'm Allie Reed.
The final arrangements to bury their 4-year-old son after suffering an unexpected tragedy. The young boy died almost a week after a family vacation. His mother tells us he was only in knee-deep water, but it's that same water being blamed in this tragic story. Brett Buffington sat down with the family tonight, who say they never saw this coming.
Well, the term dry drowning is what doctors told this family happened in this case. The odd thing is, their young son wasn't near the pool, the beach, or even close to the water. When they realized he was in trouble, by the time this family realized something was wrong, it was already too late. This Tuesday has been unimaginably tough for this family.
He was full of life.
The task of figuring out a funeral and picking out a plot to bury their 4-year-old son has been overwhelming. Frankie Delgado died over the weekend, almost a week after a quick trip to the Texas City Dike.
I guess from the water, he wasn't even in the water, just knee high.
Doctors told this mother they found fluid in Frankie's lungs and around his heart. The term they said next is one Tara Delgado will never forget.
And it was called dry drowning.
According to medical experts, deaths from dry drownings are incredibly rare. This Parent Magazine article linking dry drownings to just 1 to 2% of all drowning cases. And unlike ordinary drownings, signs a child could be in trouble might not show up for up to 24 hours after a child has been around water.
He never could get his heart beating again.
The Delgados, not knowing the symptoms to look out for, figured their son just had a stomach bug.
The symptoms just started with just vomiting and diarrhea.
Now they want Frankie's life to be a message to other parents. Be on the lookout, even after the swimsuit dries out. We did some research today on the symptoms parents need to look out for when it comes to dry drowning, especially in small children. Things like fatigue, trouble breathing, coughing, vomiting. Those are some of the things listed online. Of course, we will post those symptoms on our website. Just click on this story on KHOU.com. Brett Buffington, KHOU 11 News.
So if what I think is true, or if what some other people think is true, that there was an accident at the swimming hole, then we got to go back to the dry drowning theory that came out about a week ago. And the first thing I wanted to see were the statistics. So how many deaths by drowning per year? Now, drowning, as you can see, that's just drowning, remains a leading cause of unintentional death for people of all ages, especially for children under 14, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. On average, there are 3,500 fatalities annually from drowning, or about 10 people a day who die from drowning. So, drowning is very common. Very, very common. But what about dry drowning? Well, it says here, while drowning is the second leading cause of accidental death among children and 5th leading cause for all ages, dry drowning and secondary drowning are both extremely rare. Typically, these post-emergent respiratory syndromes only occur after a near-drowning incident. Let's talk about this.
There's no such thing as dry drowning. Doctors say this whole thing has totally been overhyped. As kids cannonball into summer pools and swim in Lake Michigan, parents keep a watchful eye to make sure they're safe. But physicians and water safety experts say one worry, so-called dry or secondary drowning, may be on the minds of parents when it shouldn't be, and shifts focus from real concerns. Everyone needs to calm down, said Dr. Peter Wernicke, member of the American Red Cross Scientific Advisory Council. This whole thing has totally been overhyped by social media and people who are not knowledgeable on the subject. With summer swim season beginning, tales appear on Facebook pages and Twitter feeds, typically involving a child who was rescued from the water, or gulped down a mouthful, and then stops breathing hours, or even days, later. But the misconception is that these children showed no symptoms between the time they left the water and when their parents noticed breathing distress, Wernicke said. It leads parents to worry that even if their child seems okay and is breathing normally, they could still be in danger. That just doesn't happen, he said. A child doesn't act fine for 8 hours and then die from drowning. In some of these incidents, the child contracted aspiration pneumonia, an infection that develops from water trapped in the lungs. But that isn't drowning, Wernicke said. It's a rare condition, he added, and a child with it would show symptoms, including coughing and labored breathing many hours after leaving the water, and parents would know something was wrong. The confusion over these conditions led the Red Cross and other medical organizations to advise medical professionals not to use the misleading terms dry drowning and secondary drowning, Wernicke said. What people should be talking about is how to prevent drowning. That includes swimming lessons, CPR training, use of life jackets, pool gates and locks, and parental supervision, he said. Despite education campaigns to that effect, the misconception remains. Calls from scared parents flood pediatricians' offices, and emergency room doctors examine seemingly fine children after they cough up pool water. Either you drown or you don't, said Dr. Charles Nozica, pediatric emergency medicine physician at Advocate Children's Hospital in Park Ridge.
So, to put that in a nutshell for you, dry drowning is when you've taken in water, well, this is what they were calling it, not respected, but you take in water, you leave the beach or the pool or the lake, and then you don't have any symptoms, and then you die because the water was still in your lung. It's not a thing. It's so much not a thing that all the doctors got together and was like, okay, we gotta get rid of this term. It's not a thing. It says this whole thing has totally been overhyped by social media and people who are not knowledgeable on the subject. Now, they're not saying it never happened. They're just saying it's not called dry drowning. That you can't take in water at one point and then just die later. If you're going to drown, you're drowning now. You're going to get so much fluid into your lungs that you can't get oxygen and you drown. That doesn't happen later. And if it does, they're saying it's very rare and that a child would present some symptoms, some coughing, some trouble breathing. It just doesn't just happen. So I kind of feel like we can rule out dry drowning. But, it's possible. It's possible because it's happened. But Dr. Charles here says either you drown or you don't. And he's a pediatric emergency medicine physician at Advocate Children's Hospital in Park Ridge. Either you drown or you don't. So now we're talking about maybe an accident that didn't include water going into her lungs. It could have been a bump on the head. Could have been, I don't know. It could have been a lot of other things, but statistically, the chances are very slim that it was a dry drowning accident. So I definitely wanted to put that into the mix because it's one of the theories as to how she could have become deceased and be in that car that way, as I have insinuated. No, I've said it. I put it out there. It's out there. But what happened to get her deceased? We still don't know. And even if she was alive in that car, she's missing now. No trace, no scent, no body. What happened? That's what all the questions are about ultimately. What happened? I don't think it was dry drowning. It seems that another term for dry drowning, two other terms, secondary drowning or delayed drowning. Again, it occurs when a child inhales even a small amount of water into the lungs. Of course, the water liquid gets into the lungs. It can cause inflammation and irritation, which makes breathing difficult, which is why they said either you drown or you don't, because it doesn't kill you right away. It makes breathing difficult, which means there are signs. You don't just drop dead. There's signs, the coughing, the difficulty breathing, that lets you know something's going on. It says today doctors realize that a person can die even if a little bit of water enters their lungs. According to the Surface Medical Association, this amount may be as small as 2 millimeters of water per kilogram of body weight. Some researchers and doctors still occasionally use the term dry drowning. Remember, extremely rare. Drowning, however, Not so rare, not at all. So maybe it was just a regular drug. I don't know where the rumor started that it was delayed. Maybe it happened right away. And then the cover up began. I don't know. But I don't think it was secondary drowning or dry drowning or delayed drowning, in my opinion. And the doctors don't even think that it's common enough to even talk about. That's interesting. But it's a theory that came out, so we had to look into it. I know I've read in one of the comments that somebody actually went through this. Again, it's not impossible. It has happened before. I'm not challenging that, but it's very rare. So, what exactly is dry drowning? We looked at statistics and opinions and different things. But let's look at this definition they break down. Dry drowning is not an actual medical condition. It is a term that has been used and sensationalized by the media to describe when lungs of drowning victims contain no water in about 10 to 20% of autopsies. The reason for this is because of laryngospasm, laryngospasm, which is when the body forcefully closes the airways. This can happen when water is attempting to enter the lungs, Dr. Groen says. In fact, Dr. Groen says many drownings are actually dry, in the sense that very little water actually enters the lungs. The main problem during a drowning event is lack of oxygen to the brain. If a person is rescued before the brain runs out of oxygen, then the small amounts of water in the lungs is absorbed and causes no problems. Or it can cause excessive coughing that gets better or worse over the next few hours. The treatment is the same regardless of whether small amounts of water, wet, are present or not, dry, Dr. Groen says. He says the cases of dry drowning reported by the media in the past few years were not due to drowning, but rather other medical issues. Children do not show any symptoms for multiple hours or days and then just die from dry drowning. Excuse me, I read that last sentence completely wrong. Well, not completely, but it says children do not show any symptoms for multiple hours or days and then just die from dry drowning. So again, Summer could not have gone through that because dry drowning doesn't even happen immediately. It could be multiple hours or days. There was a reported death in 2017, but the child was found to have had a heart infection, and the death wasn't related at all to the fact he was swimming. The child that died in 2018 from a reported dry drowning was actually suffering from aspiration pneumonia because she had water blown into her lungs while playing in the pool. 2 days later, the fluid developed an infection, Dr. Groen said. So, there are signs for dry drowning, and it takes time. So, I'm seeing that we had a straight up drowning or some other type of accident. In my opinion, and based on education that I am giving myself and anyone else who's interested in taking it. So now let's look at some other statistics and theories. Because filicide is a real thing. Parents that kill their children is a real thing. On average, 12,175 children 0 to 19 years of age died each year in the United States from an unintentional injury. Now, even though I just mentioned filicide, I'm just showing statistics on accidental deaths because they happen. The problem starts when you don't call 911 immediately, regardless of how bad it is, how guilty you feel, whatever the case may be. 911 and take the negligent charges, but don't go for murder, kidnapping, abduction. Just don't. You don't have to do all of that. Again, we can see drowning is the leading cause of unintentional injury-related death among children ages 1 through 4. We're at a lake. I mean, yeah, maybe you turned your head to do something else inappropriate with that child that you took out there with you, and she drowned. It is possible. But what happened next? Nobody wants to continue the story. It's just the flowers, the basement, it doesn't add up. Y'all got to go back into the lab, come back out with something better. Now, I found this article from back in 2005 in the WebMD Parenting Archives. It says, next to your car, your home may be one of the most dangerous places for your child. And we know that we were told when Summer got home, they went and planted a garden, she got candy, and then mom sent her inside with the other minors and told them to watch her. I'll be back. 2 minutes later, she allegedly came back. Summer had gone down to the basement and she was gone. Okay. So that means they were in the home. And from what I'm seeing here, let's find it. There we go. Of the more than 5,100 unintentional injuries that happened each year in a known location, more than half, 55% of the injuries happened at home. So more statistics that point towards the home and the family. Either drowning, not dry drowning, just drowning from not having any type of flotation device or a parent close enough to grab her out of the water, even in the TikToks that we saw. Could have been a drowning. Or it could have happened when they got home. Since she was being watched by children, who knows what could have happened? Wrestle a little bit. Uh-oh, she bumped her head, fell down the stairs. Or worse, could have been a pedophile in the vicinity. But more than half, 55% of the injuries happened at home out of 5,100. More than half. Way, way more common than a dry drowning. Totally possible something happened in the home. But what happened, Candus? Donald, the other Candus, boys. Did the little boys get too rough with her while you weren't there? You came back to a total catastrophe? And you didn't want your kids to go to juvie? And you didn't want to be locked up for being wherever you were when you should have been watching your children? So y'all just covered it up, called Don at work, told him what happened. He says, call 911. Never mind, I'll do it myself. What happened? Which one of all these things happened, really happened?